Good evening, everybody. I want to call to order the May 14th, 2026 meeting of Brattleboro's Charter Revision Commission. We don't have any minutes to approve, so we're gonna, I don't think we're there because Joy's usually there, so we're gonna wait. We're gonna skip that item. Before I actually keep going, I want to make sure people online know and people in the room know that everything we're talking about tonight, you can get on our charter page, which is at brattleboro.gov/charter-commission. So our agenda's there and some of the meeting materials that we're going to be talking tonight are there. So if you need to reference something, you can go right to that website. The next item is to modify the agenda as needed, if needed. The one thing I want to modify is to go a little bit faster through a recap of our charter revision work to date and the first item of new business, which is the results of the March 3rd vote. We have Hillary Francis here and she's on a timeline because she has another obligation that she has to go to. So I want to do like a quick on those two, and if people want to go back and talk more about what we've been doing and the results on March 3rd, we will do that, but I want to be really respectful and get Hillary out. So if everybody's okay with that, that's how I would like to handle those first two things. And they actually work well together as a way of introducing why Hillary's here tonight. So just as a super quick recap, and
Sign in.
As a super quick recap, the last time we were here together was August 28th, 2025. And right prior to that, in July, we had gone to the select board to inform them that we were ready to complete our work. We had dozens of charter changes we had put, which included open town meeting, coming from RTM to OTM. And we were ready, and we were gonna be asking them to put our charter on a special election for the first Tuesday in November in 2025. Right after we went to the July meeting, we were informed that there were two citizen petitions that involved charter changes, which was the Australian ballot and the open town meeting charter changes. So in September, after we met in August 28th, we went to the select board and said, we're gonna pause our work and wait to see what happens with those two charter petitions, which the select board were gonna put on for the March 3rd, 2026 election. So August 28th was the last time we saw each other, and this is gonna be our first meeting since the March election. So that's in a nutshell why we are back here and how we got here after working for 3 years. That segues really well into the March 3rd election. And as we know, there were 3 issues on the election. 2 of them were charter petitions. The first thing was not a part of charter petition. It was put on by the select board, and that was whether or not to discontinue representative town meeting. Then the 2 charter petitions brought about by citizens. The first one was, if representative town meeting is discontinued, do you want to go to Australian ballot as our form of town meeting? The second one was, if RTM is discontinued, do you want to go to open town meeting as our form of town meeting? As we all know, representative town meeting was discontinued, and I'm not going to get into the votes right now, but if somebody wants to go back, we can. But the open town meeting and Australian ballot were not head-to-heads. They were 2 separate questions. And the Australian ballot, when it was asked, if we discontinue representative town meeting, do you want to go with Australian ballot? That question got more yeses than nos. And the open town meeting question of, if we discontinue representative town meeting, do you want to go with the Australian ballot, got more yeses than nos. So there are 2 charter petitions that were passed, charter change petitions that were passed on March 3rd. Those are right now up in the legislature, but because of the timing, they're not going to go anywhere this year, but they're there. Which leads us here, we are back. And that is why, in a nutshell, I asked Hillary to come tonight, because one of the major things that we have to discuss is, will what happened on March 3rd impact what we do with the charter that we drafted and we were ready to send to the voters. So I thought it might be instructive for everybody, not just us, but members of the public, for Hillary as town clerk who oversees elections and representative town meeting and then open town meeting, to really just give us what are the mechanics of doing each of these things that we're doing, so that when we're talking about it, we have an understanding. Because we all know we've gone to representative town meetings, or some of us have gone to representative town meetings, some of us went to open town meeting, some of us go and actually do Australian ballot votes in March. So we've all done this, but now I think we're gonna be thinking about it in a way that we're not just a participant, that we have to understand the process. So I asked Hillary to come and tell us, like, it's sort of a boot camp for dummies kind of thing, you know, how does the town clerk's office organize an open town meeting, and how does the town clerk's office organize an Australia ballot? And what goes in it time-wise and mechanics, so that when we're talking about this, we will hopefully make informed decisions.
Great. So thank you for having me. This is not an easy black and white discussion. And part of that, Kate, I don't know if you posted online the draft calendar that I had shared with you.
Yes.
And so I pulled together a draft calendar for the 2028 election. And every election looks different, right? Between town meeting and August state primary elections and November general elections and RTM versus OTM, right? It all looks different. Every 4 years, town meeting day is coupled with a presidential primary election, which has different timelines than a straightforward town meeting day. When the schools merged, and then we started having a youth vote in Brattleboro, that changed the dynamics of how we run an election, a town meeting day. It meant that we had to have 2 separate ballots instead of 1 ballot. So there's a lot of moving pieces and there's a lot of logistics. When I put together this calendar, I tried to think about the things that I've been hearing some people in the community saying. And so I wanted to sort of lay it out as, right, we have the ballot vote the first Tuesday in March for town meeting day. And then we have open town meeting. I put it in as 2 to 3 weeks after town meeting day, just because I've heard that that's what y'all are considering. And so I needed a placeholder in here. And then I've also heard that there's potentially going to be discussion of, after open town meeting, whatever is decided there, sending that to the voters by ballot to ratify. So I wanted to give a sense of, if we do all of that, what does this look like? And then I also pulled together some very rough budget numbers for what it costs to run an open town meeting and a representative town meeting. So in a typical election year, with the election starting the election being the first Tuesday in March, our office starts preparing for that in November. We start pulling together things like petition forms and consent forms for candidates. We start pulling together absentee ballot request forms, and people start actually requesting their ballots at that point. For when it was representative town meeting, we had to pull together, okay, how many open seats are available per district? How many partial seats are there? What does that look like? In fact, going previous for open town meeting, we have to start in June reserving the gym for representative or open town meeting. So it really starts well before. But I have to start lining up poll workers. People's schedules fill up fast, and especially parents who their kids are off of school, right? And so we really need to get this on people's calendars to commit to doing this. So the work really starts in November for planning both town meeting day election, as well as open town meeting and representative town meeting. And then January 20th is the deadline, or not for this scenario in 2028, 47 days before the date of the election is the last date that an article can be placed on the warning for an item, right? So like not a candidate who's looking to run, but somebody wants to place a question on like these petitions, right? That's 47 days before. Not more than 40 days before the election is the first day to post the warning. And then the sixth Monday preceding the election is the deadline for candidates to get their petitions in. As soon as, like, I have to have a proof of what that ballot's going to look like. So as soon as somebody takes out a petition, I'm working on drafting that ballot. So that the minute that deadline hits at 5 o'clock, I can get that ballot off to the printer. They can create a draft for me to proof. My staff and I sit there and we go letter for letter, proofing it to make sure that everything is accurate. And then we're going back and forth with the printers because it's a really tight timeline to approve the proof, get the ballots tested on their end, printed and shipped to us in time for mailing ballots, because ballots have to be in the office and start being mailed 20 days before the election. Backing up a little bit, within 30 days before the election, we have to hold a BCA pre-election meeting. And then, so that happens usually during the month of February. Then not more than 30 days before the election, we have to, as the last day to post the warning. And we have to make sure that that warning is going to the select board at the right time. Oftentimes they have to have a special meeting to do that. So there's a lot of coordinating. And then, there's a timeline for when we have to post sample ballots and post voter checklists and things like that. And then we start in-person early voting as soon as we get the tabulators tested, which takes some time. And we have to wait for the memory cards from the printer and the programmers to do all of that. So there's a lot of moving pieces in that short amount of time. And then the first Tuesday in March is town meeting day, where we also have the unified school district election. And then the next 2 days, we're spending our time reporting out to the media. If it's also a presidential primary, we're reporting out to the state what the results were. And then usually that week or the following week, depending on when open town meeting is scheduled, we're also working on an information session for open town meeting. So I'm also coordinating all of that, making sure we have the location, making sure BCTV is available, all of those pieces. Then within 10 days after the election, a candidate for local office can file for a recount. That did not happen this year. The last 2 years, though, it happened with the school district. And so we had to hold a recount and do that in that time frame. The third Tuesday in March, the second Saturday after town meeting day is what I put in as open town meeting.
And Hillary, just pause for 1 second. That is the date that we had talked about that works best for you folks, correct?
Yes. Either the second Saturday or the third Saturday from talking to the school, as well as for our schedules in our office. And then immediately after, again, assuming that this goes into the charter, the Monday after open town meeting, we hold the organizational meeting for the select board, which I am at, swearing in the new select board members and helping them with their organizational meeting until they have a chair. And then the next day, the third Tuesday in March, is the WSESD annual meeting that myself and my staff have to be at, checking in voters. And then assuming that it's decided that There is then a vote for the budget by ballot from the voters to ratify what is decided at open town meeting. Again, that's just what I've heard as a possible discussion. Also that Tuesday, the same day as the WSESD annual meeting, the select board will need to warn the ballot vote for the budget to be 30 to 40 days prior, to be 30 to 40 days from that date that they warn it. If a ballot vote is automatic. Another thing, well, I'll skip over that for now. And then that sort of kicks everything into gear again, right? Like, so 20 days prior to that election, early ballots have to be available, so we start a whole new early and absentee voting system, process. About a week before the vote, I'm assuming we would have another info session, so we would need to coordinate that. Immediately after the election is reporting. 10 days after the election would be the last day to request a recount. And then I would just have you all be aware that in odd calendar years, like this year, we would immediately, like normally, so this year, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I started preparing for the August election. And then we give our staff about a week after the August election and start preparing for the November election. And about a week after the November election, we start preparing for the following March election. And so that would, the preparation for August, if there is this second budget ballot vote, would be pushed back a few weeks until after we complete that. We really want to close out an election before we start thinking about the next election. So that's sort of the timeline and process. In terms of budget, it's a little bit hard to give you exact numbers. For open town meeting, it'll take a little while for us to figure out exactly what that costs because this was new this year, right? We needed some new supplies, we needed some things, we were figuring some things out. But I would say an estimated cost is about $7,000 to run open town meeting. And I would clarify that that includes staff time on open town meeting day. It does not include my time or my staff's time leading up to. I would say representative town meeting was probably about 100 to 150 hours of our time leading up to it. Open town meeting is probably less because we're not dealing with issuing petitions and verifying those petitions and calculating how many open seats there are. We're not organizing caucuses, so logistically it's a little bit simpler. For a ballot election, again, not including the lead-up costs, for myself and my staff, it's probably $20,000 to $21,000. Some of that depends, we have volunteers in the office every day for 4 to 5 hours a day during early voting, processing absentee ballots and helping us with people who want to vote in person early. Some of the time those volunteers truly volunteer their time, some of the time they wish to be paid. So it fluctuates. I would say for our office, in a year, we probably spend about 1,700 hours on elections, especially if there's 3 elections that year. That also includes maintaining our voter checklist and things like that, which will be happening regardless of what happens with these elections, right? So it's hard to give a true amount of each election, how much time is spent.
Can I hit one question?
Yes,
about
please.
And I know you have to go, so we're gonna collect other questions and we can answer them to Hillary, but with the cost of an Australian ballot vote, if this is like one question on a ballot, could like one question on a ballot reduce the cost? I mean, is there something that's, no matter what it is it 20,000 or is it because it's more intricate?
It could reduce the cost, right? So ballots and tabulators are about $6,800 of that. I would say that if we are choosing to go ahead and use tabulators, the cost of programming and printing would probably be less because it's a shorter ballot, right? If we could choose not to use tabulators and say, it's one question, it's yes or no, we're gonna hand count that, it's not that big of a deal. But if we're anticipating a high turnout, we're gonna need more counters to be present to count, or we're gonna need fewer counters and it will take them longer. And so it's a matter of paying staff time or paying technology time. And so I think it would be less than the 6,800. How much less, I can't tell you.
You said 6,800 for the tabulator.
Around, and that's the printing of the ballots and the programming of the tabulators.
So, just hypothetically, I have a lot of logistical questions, but say that we went to something like this, how much time would you need to turn around for printing and programming a tabulator? Like say you had this vote, and then you're gonna put it to an Australian ballot, like you can't just do that 30 to 40 days from then, I assume, because you need time to program the tabulators, print the ballots. Like how much lead time would you need in addition to the 30 to 40 days to warn a ballot vote?
That's a great question. So if we're using tabulators, the way that it works for the March town meeting day is, right, the deadline for candidates to get their names in is 6 Mondays before, so ultimately 5 weeks before. And that's a super tight timeline. That's like that night, we're staying late, we're proofing everything, we're getting it to the printer that night, so that the next day they can get us proof and we can go back and forth, get it approved, and then they can get the ballots to us. So it really is a 6-week timeline before the election at a minimum, for us to be able to get ballots printed. Again, we could say it's one question, yes or no, and we're gonna hand count them. And then we're printing ballots ourselves, we're not worrying about programming, we're not worrying about testing tabulators, it's simple, it's simpler, it's probably more cost effective. But what if a petition is circulated and somebody gets another question or 3 on that ballot? And then it's not just one yes or no question.
I just have one other procedural question. You said you have the BCA meeting 30 days before. Would that be the same for a special election or is that just for scheduled elections?
We probably would want to, I don't know if it's required, but we probably would, in good practice, hold a BCA meeting regardless of whether or not it's required, and it's not 30 days before, it's within 30 days.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and usually at those BCA meetings, a lot of the longer standing questions are voted on until otherwise rescinded, right? So it's mostly who is going to be the presiding officer should I not be available to be there at the election? Are we approving the election worker schedule, and when do we want to have an election worker training? So those are the types of questions, but we need to make some of those decisions with enough advance notice so I can let the election workers know, hey, this is the date of the training, and put it on your calendar.
I think Peter had a quick question.
Yeah, I have 2 quick clarifying questions. One's super picky, I apologize, but
No worries.
the last bullet of your outline here talks about odd years, and you said that in the presentation too, but I think you mean even years is when you would have the August primary?
Yeah,
Right, it's 2026, yes,
Yeah.
even, thank you.
Thanks, yeah, I just want to make sure we're all singing from the same sheet of music. And then a more nuanced question, because part of what we're gonna be wrestling with is the sequencing of this, trying to make it as efficient as possible with limiting cost, but limiting also like cumbersomeness and complexity if we can. At least I think we are. I'm entering this discussion thinking that we're gonna be trying to arrive at a solution that can touch all the bases that need touching without making it more complicated than it needs to be. And so a question I have, and I think I know the answer, is could the first Tuesday in March balloting day be moved off of town meeting day to be some other time? And what I think is the answer, and I'm interested to know if this is true, is for our local election purposes, we could move it to some other day if it was declared that way in the charter and it got approved that way. But every 4 years, we're gonna have a presidential primary, and every year we're gonna have a school district election. So what we're actually doing then is adding complexity, because then you're having to do a town meeting day election and a separate one as well.
Correct. And I don't know, Hannah has a legal thought on this, I believe, but I don't know if we can move it. I imagine we can, but you're right, we'd still have to have the school, and Hannah is saying no.
Okay.
By law, we have to do the ballot voting for town meeting on town meeting day.
So the floor vote could be changed, right? The open town meeting
can be changed, but
the ballot.
Ballot voting has to be the first Tuesday in March.
So I'd like to come back to that when we're having discussion. I don't want to hold up Hillary, but just about what laws are so in stone that a charter change couldn't impact that. I'd like to better understand that.
And David, Hillary has to get out of here, so do you have a question for Hillary? Okay. Then we're gonna get her out.
And I have a thought before I leave
Okay.
that I would like to share.
No, that's not. All right, so I'm David Gardenstein. I want to know whether we have to have in-person voting or whether we can just have in-person at the clerk's desk and then by mail, and whether not having voting on a ballot day would save money and save effort for the town clerk, so that maybe the vote to ratify or reject the town meeting approved budget could just be done by a mail and absentee.
So I would say that we could certainly do mail and absentee. We could hold the election day in the town clerk's office and close for other business and just have it function similar to how we do in-person early voting, just have it on a day. I believe that we do have to have an election day when you have a ballot. And part of that is Vermont has same-day voter registration, and people have to be able to come in and register to vote on that day. And so I think we do have to have a specified day.
Alright, is this gonna be a quick
Yeah,
one for
and
Hillary?
it's echoing what Peter brought up, but maybe this is way too simple, but that's how I try to make
Can
things.
you identify yourself?
I'm Randy Blodgett from West Brattleboro. Is it possible to flip this on its head, have everything on town meeting day in March, move the open town meeting the last day of January, move the budget, move everything back, select board would finish the budget sooner, everything would get done sooner, give you maybe another couple days versus your tight 5 weeks you talked about. We spend one day doing all this. There is nothing after.
That's a
Change
question.
is good.
That's a question we're gonna talk about.
So I don't know, I have never heard that brought up,
Yeah.
and I know that involves a broader audience, but
Yeah.
that makes your schedule maybe a
Yeah.
little easier. It's not as
Yeah.
tight, you could give more room. And everything just has to be moved,
That's all right.
and it would save a lot of money.
I wanna get Hillary out, so do you wanna?
Yes.
And we're gonna come back to your,
So I would just say that as we think about if, like disregarding what Randy just said, because that's something for you all to discuss, but if we keep it sort of with the timeline that I'm talking about, I would, from my perspective, hearing at select board meetings, and at town meeting, right, the concern about our tax dollars, right? And how much that keeps increasing every year. Adding another election automatically, and not only the cost of the ballot itself and running the election, but our office, for folks who don't know, just decided that we're closing to the public on Wednesdays going forward. We're still working, we're in the office, but we don't have the capacity with our small staff to get all of the work done that we need to get done. If we add another election on top of that automatically every year, we need more staff. So I would just say that we need to just be mindful of the cost. And I might offer that with representative town meeting, in the charter, there was a trigger that existed that said, if representative town meeting passes this budget or passes anything and a certain number of people petition, then it can go to a ballot of the entire electorate. And you all might wish to consider some sort of trigger like that so that it's not an automatic, right? We have an open town meeting and then whatever is decided automatically goes to the voters. What if 80% of open town meeting says, yes, we want to vote that way, and 7,000 people showed up for that, right? Pie in the sky, not likely, but it's a possibility. So if it seems to me that it's I don't want to say wasted resources, but there are ways to put something in there that says, if a petition is circulated within this amount of time with this many signatures, we'll go to ballot. Or something even more automatic than that, that says, if the budget passes by less than this margin of the people who voted, then it automatically goes to a ballot. And so I think that there are ways to put something in the charter that says we're giving the voters this opportunity, but it's not an automatic thing when it's not necessary.
Okay, do you need to go? I don't want,
I do, but
I want to ask a quick follow-up because I think it's important. We hear what you say about the burden of an additional election. And so I just want to follow up on Randy's question because if in the effort to avoid having a second balloting election each spring, we focused on the first Tuesday in March as when that's going to happen, but instead accelerated an in-person meeting. Is that from a logistical point of view, if there was a mid to late January in-person meeting instead of a third weekend in March in-person meeting, does that throw you a curveball, or does that make things easier because you've got just the same as what we've had before with in-person and one of each?
I don't know, there are logistics that I'd have to look into, right? Like the high school would probably not be available during that time frame unless we did it on a Sunday. Mm-hmm. But they wouldn't be available on a Saturday because it's basketball season. And so they wouldn't be able to commit to that, right? We've been encouraged to look at other places. We have. Nothing else has panned out within the Brattleboro limits. Does it mean that something couldn't pan out? No. And does it mean we couldn't do a Sunday meeting? No. For us, it's dog license season. It's a very busy season in our office, the whole first quarter of the year. Does it mean we can't do it? No. It's all possibilities. It's things that I didn't dive deep into that possibility, so I don't know how to completely, fully, truly answer that.
Thank you.
But it is certainly a possibility.
I'm making you leave right now.
Okay, thank you very much.
You have something you need to go to, so you're leaving.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll collect questions and be back in touch.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have Gary on the line.
Hey Gary, we're gonna wait, unless it's something for Hillary, I wanna wait, but Hillary has now left the building. So if Gary, do you mind waiting? Okay. Now that Hillary has given us what she can give us now, I just wanna make sure, does anybody wanna go back and talk about how we got here and the votes for Australian ballot?
Can I just,
Yeah.
I just would advocate for remembering that we have gone through
Yeah.
a lot of these things already, and just because there were these petitioned articles doesn't mean we necessarily need to backtrack or undo anything that we've done, because we considered those options as part of our process, and I just want to be mindful that we've put in a lot of the work already.
Yeah, and what I want to talk about next, and this is, I want us to talk here before I get the public involved for just a second. I think our next question is, Hannah, you beat me to saying what I want to say, is that we've worked for 3 years, we have a charter recommendations that includes a lot of things, and it includes open town meeting. But we did have a vote in March, and I think for me, our next conversation needs to be, what do we as a commission see in that vote, and where do we think it fits in with where we go next? I know I've thought about it, and I've thought a lot about it the last couple of days, and I know other people have either thought about it or haven't thought about it. So I think it would be worth it right now, before the public tells us things that we already might agree with them on, is that we sort of have a conversation amongst ourselves on where we think we're going. You know, do people think that we're ready to go forward with the charter that we have to the voters, or do we want to make changes based on what we heard on March 3rd? That's what I think we need to discuss as a group right now. And then we can get into the intricacies. Maybe people have ideas, and maybe people aren't ready to weigh in. I know I have thoughts. I don't want to start the thoughts because I'm the chair of this thing, so I'll have other people start, but is everybody okay thinking that that's the first thing we need to address? Because it really is the thing that's gonna, what we have to figure out, at least in my opinion.
I'll start.
Okay.
In the draft that we have, we put in a lot more items that are voted on by Australian ballot than previous charter. We put in the election of the Human Services Committee, the election of the Finance Committee, just to name two. And I know it was a very close vote total, but open town meeting did get more positive votes than Australian ballot. Maybe not by much, but elections often happen on small margins. I liked Hillary's suggestion in her draft that we do open town meeting, and that if people are not happy with the budget that's voted at open town meeting, that there can be a petition for a ballot. I hadn't thought of that before.
Well, I just double checked our last draft in the red line version, that was already in the charter, and we did leave that in the charter, so I think we did consider it and
Oh, I
decided
didn't
to stay.
I missed that totally when I was reading through it. Yeah. Okay.
Just real quick, Bob has raised his hand.
Oh, Bob Fisher.
I should mention, Bob, you can interject at any time.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Bob.
I just, with regard to that, what was just brought up, under state law right now, Title 17, 2661, is the ability to seek a reconsideration of any article at town meeting upon a petition of 5%. So whether you want to put that in your charter or rely on state law, it's already there. You don't necessarily need an automatic ballot vote after another vote on a budget matter. If you wanted to, if it's such a bad vote, people can always do a petition to reconsider. So I only raise that in that what Hillary brings up is a lot of stress. I think she's kind of downplaying the stress and the time it takes for her office. But it's a lot of work to then have a whole nother mandatory meeting. So in any event, I just wanted to raise that you have that power under state law already. And then another question is, and I joined the meeting a little bit late, but is there a motion on the floor of your committee to go to some hybrid?
No.
Okay.
No, we just started talking about how if in any way does the two petition votes in March impact what we're gonna do with our charter.
Okay.
So we're just starting that discussion.
No.
We haven't missed anything.
I'll let all of you talk about what I refer to as kind of reading the tea leaves as to the numbers. But when you look at the results of the votes, each petitioned article passed.
Right.
That's the very simplest way of saying it. And to say that it didn't pass is simply wrong. Both of those petitioned articles passed. So now they've been sent to the legislature, and the legislature wants the town to give a little better direction on where you're going. So I think your discussion as to what does this commission do to resolve that and give direction, and whatever recommendation that you make by the existing charter and by the fact that we no longer have representative town meeting is going to have to go to a ballot vote in any event. So that's your process on once you come up with a recommendation as a committee, then that's going to get voted upon by Australian ballot, because that would have to follow the Title 17 statutory charter adoption at that point.
Hey, I have a follow-up question to Bob, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
Bob, for your, the 5% needed to reconsider any petition, is there a timeline on that, or is it like?
Yeah, I believe it is 30 days. I hope I don't lose you here, but yes, 30 days.
Our charter says 10.
Okay.
Right.
But we could.
And by all means, if the legislature adopts the charter and it says 10 days, then that would be what applies to the town of Brattleboro. And the sooner the better in terms of moving on things.
Well,
But that's 10 days to file a petition.
And then
That's not 10 days for the election.
Right, that's correct.
Yeah. But state statute says 30 days to file a
Yeah,
petition.
you have 30 days to file, yes.
so should I continue?
Oh, yes. Thanks, Bob. That was helpful.
I'll be quiet now.
Anytime.
Interrupt me anytime. So I've also been talking to a lot of people, or a lot of people have been talking to me, including several people who liked the idea of Australian ballot, and they actually voted for Australian ballot. And they went to open town meeting and they really thought it was great. I mean, they thought the discussion was good. They thought the fact that people came and went, and some people just voted on the budget. If you look at the totals for the day, when we did the little pink thing and the gray thing or whatever, I think the budget had the most number of votes of the things that we voted on.
Ready, just one sec. We're
Well,
just
just clarify, we didn't have a paper ballot on the vote, it was a voice vote only on the
Right.
budget.
That's true.
That's true. Yeah.
You're right, sorry. But nobody called for a ballot, and they could have called for a ballot.
There was no need, but
Okay.
But people that I talked to, even the RTM people, thought that open town meeting was an excellent way to go. And I'm sorry Joy missed it. She was doing home repairs. So I like the idea of basically sticking with what we've done and clarifying the position of being able to call for a ballot vote on the budget. We could make it 30 days instead of 10 days to give people more time. Under state law, we could make it 15, I mean, we could pick a different date, a different number of days. Anyway, that's kind of where I am right now.
Okay. Would anyone else, Peter?
Thanks. I find myself in an awkward position because personally, I, at the time of the vote back in March and the run up to that vote, spoke out publicly and strongly in favor of open town meeting, or an in-person town meeting, whether it be open or representative town meeting. And as I said here, I continue to personally believe that that's the best way for a community to be making these decisions. But I don't think it's sufficient for us just to, I agree that we spent a lot of time, gave a lot of effort, heard a lot from the public, considered what other communities do. We were thorough in our work that led up to what is currently in our set of recommendations. But that was before there was a vote of the voters of Brattleboro in March. And the vote of the voters in Brattleboro, though it lands us in an awkward spot that we need to reconcile, was in favor of both Australian ballot and open town meeting. And so I feel like we need to work harder at seeing how the two might work together. We might end up working through a process like that. I would think over a few meetings. I wouldn't think we would try to make that decision tonight. But consider the things we need to consider about both the logistics and what's good for our local democracy. And if that lands us in a place where we think there is a better system, or at least a system that more thoroughly integrates these two different methods, as opposed to what we've already done. I totally agree. What's in the proposed charter is more empowering for Australian ballot proponents than what our system has had in town government up until now. But it's got the big missing piece of the budget, which was really the focus of a lot of the discussion related to the election and the voting on these two referendum questions. So I think we need to explore some of these things, like the timing and sequencing of how a meeting, an in-person meeting, would relate to a ballot, whether the order has to be like that or whether the order could be in the other way, whether it's practical to consider a January town meeting, open town meeting, so that the first Tuesday in March could be the vote on that financial business as well as the election of officers. I think there's some things we need to dig a little deeper on together before we land in a place, and I don't know what that place will look like, but it might look different than the place that we're in as of last August. And I think it's important that we explore that. And I would say, I guess, just in the interest of transparency too, aside from just my personal point of view, which continues to be, I want as much open town meeting participation and decision-making as possible. Aside from that, I think there is a valid reading of the results that says that the community was very close on whether or not to give up representative town meeting and move to a different system. That was a 51-49 split. But each of the other two questions was overwhelmingly approved, and open town meeting was overwhelmingly approved by even more. I think a fair reading of those results does lean to the value of an in-person meeting based on that the the vote was so close in the first instance on RTM, or else, if it had gone a little bit the other way, we'd still have RTM. It didn't, so then these come into play, and then of these, while they didn't go head to head, they were both overwhelmingly approved. There were more yeses for open town meeting than for Australian ballot, and fewer no's for open town meeting than for Australian ballot. I think it's reasonable for us to consider that in the way that we think about how the two things work together. But I don't think it would be appropriate for us to just reflect this evening on the volume of our and depth of our consideration previously and land there again without exploring some of these other options.
I don't disagree with that.
Hannah?
I'm going to respectfully disagree with Peter, but I don't think that these results tell us anything other than these both passed and RTM was discontinued. We can't say that people want both. I don't think logistically it makes any sense to try and consider both because of all of the reasons Hillary just brought up. And then there's also the consideration of if it's automatically both, is the open meeting an advisory vote? Is the second meeting the ballot vote the binding vote? What happens if it fails? Do you go back to an open town meeting? Do you go all the way back to the select board? That you could end up in this cycle where we go months and months and months just with failing budgets and it getting to vote on it twice doesn't make any sense, but having the opportunity to have a referendum and a recall, like a revote on it, is different than voting on it twice. And I understand and appreciate the desire to try and look at how we can make everything happen, but we can't make everything happen. And we've put a lot of time and work into this. I'm really happy with the document we have. I think our goal is to come up with something that's functional for the town, not something that's going to make every single person happy. And I think that we've done that. And there's maybe a couple things that came up in the course of this first open town meeting that we could add in or change. But overall, I am confident in the work we've done. And, we were waiting to find out if RTM got discontinued, and it did. And that's the most important thing for our work, in my mind.
I'm happy to go next. I'm happy with what we did, but we had a vote in March that said people want both. I mean, there are a huge amount of people in our town who want to have an in-person meeting, and there is an equally huge number of people in town who want the ability to go and vote by Australian ballot. And I agree with Peter that we have to have that conversation. I don't think it has to be so hard. Maybe I'm overthinking it and I've spent too much time thinking about this. I want us to try to do both in some way, whether it's what Hillary said, do a trigger. I don't like telling people, well, if you don't like it, you got to go get it's 400 and something signatures. That's not what the voters, I don't think, want to have to go and get 400 and something signatures. But maybe if we have a whole conversation about it, we'll all agree that's what it is. I'm not ready right now to just jettison and say, no, we're not going to even consider absentee ballot. But again, I might be out thing. I want to consider absentee ballot. I also have spent the last couple of days, I had to have dental work done, so I've been watching TV for the last 2 days and watching the Vermont legislature. And I really appreciate our local legislators. I appreciate all the legislators. But right now there are two bills sitting up in Montpelier, one from Brattleboro, one for Australian ballot and one for open town meeting. And they can't get to them right now because of the timing. But watching and again, there's good work being done. Don't anyone take this as a slam. There's really good work being done in Montpelier. But I don't want Montpelier deciding how we in Brattleboro do our town meeting. So I'm hoping we can figure out some way, and again, this might be a pipe dream, that we can come together and figure out some way that we can listen to what the voters said to us in March and send that up to Montpelier. Because I think if we don't, somebody up there is gonna make a decision for us, and I don't wanna do a form of town meeting that we don't decide we want. That struck me for literally 2 days watching the Vermont legislature on TV. And again, these people are doing a lot of stuff, but realizing it's not even gonna be our Brattleboro reps who are in the committees that are making the decision on how Brattleboro, because whatever we send has to go up and be put in the form of a bill. And the 2 things that we just sent up there can be reintroduced next year. So we're either gonna get nothing out of the legislature or we're gonna get something that we might not like. So I think it's really incumbent upon us as a Charter Revision Commission, at the very least, to take either, this meeting and the next meeting, to really look into what the possibilities are of doing both. And maybe at our next May meeting, we'll throw up our hands and go, there's no way. But I don't want to throw up my hands at this meeting and say there's no way, because I think we owe it to our community members, because this is a long-term, this is a charter change, and I want us to, not us, the 6 of us, because this is, whatever we decide is gonna have to go back to for a townwide vote, as Bob said. But I want it to be in our hands and not people in Montpelier who know nothing about us and aren't gonna be the ones doing what they decide that we're gonna do. And they could very well decide something for us that we don't like. So I'm feeling, again, thanks to my dentist, I've spent 2 days really getting I really think that I don't want to give up tonight saying that we're not going to try to make this work. That's where I am.
Oh, I never thought we were gonna make a decision tonight. I mean, we have 3 more meetings scheduled.
Yeah.
I'm happy to share thoughts. I mean, I will say that I am proud of the work that we have done. It took a long time to get there. I am still trying to have a personal opinion about the election results, because they were not head-to-head questions.
Yes.
So being able to say that it's apples and oranges is not. So even saying that, sitting here, I can stand behind the charter that we have drafted. I'm happy to consider a well-structured conversation, but about how to put things together, but extra ballots, extra meetings, and time is just, would be so painful to bring to the community. To be able, the budgets have just been going up, and to not weigh that as an impact of our work. Yes, we are volunteers and we've been putting that together, but to sign up the community for thousands more dollars each year is just, that needs weighed and balanced amongst everything else. So that will take some more thought. And that's not going to be an easy decision. And I hope it is a part of the conversation of the info sessions when a final charter is put in front of the community, that those questions are also asked at that point. Because so much has been words on paper, and just pushing paper around, but now rubber hits the road, and that has a cost. So that is, I'm not back at square one, but because I'm proud of our work, but yeah, some of this is a lot still.
Does it make sense?
Denise hasn't said
I'm
anything.
sorry.
It's okay. I'm with Joy. I like the work we've done, and I'm wondering if there's something we haven't thought of that maybe will show itself. But but I think if the people that made, these voting decisions knew about the potential increase in taxes, if it would have been the same outcome.
And what I have right off what you just said, Denise, is, because I was thinking about this. I mean, there are a couple, there's the automatic Hillary's thing here, which is an automatic goes to Australian ballot. Or what Hillary was talking about, there's a trigger that it goes to Australian ballot if, and what is that trigger? Is it people go out and get signatures, or is it it would have to be, if we were counting the vote at representative town meeting and it only voted, if the budget only passed by or was defeated by a certain amount, it goes to Australian ballot. That's another kind of trigger. Is there a way to do it that's not necessarily making it automatic? That
Well,
gives.
that's what I was thinking, is that at open town meeting, you automatically have a ballot vote on the budget.
You're saying at open town meeting, there's a ballot vote.
There's a ballot vote. And if the budget doesn't pass by a certain margin, whatever,
It goes to the town.
it goes to Australian ballot.
Townwide.
Yes.
So in this hypothetical, say it passes by less than whatever this margin is, but then say it passes by even less of a margin at Australian ballot, does that mean that vote is any more or less valid?
Well, I mean, that's the next thing. What's
I don't know.
Well, that's the next thing, is if we do an Australian ballot vote, how is that weighted with the town meeting vote? And is there a similar thing that it has to, and Peter probably could talk about this, if there's the Australian ballot vote, because we can't get into a never-ending cycle. There has to be an end. And it's almost like, what's the end and how does it end? But to me, that's the kind of thing, if we, because Denise was just saying, maybe if we talk about it, there'll be things that come up, and that we can talk about some of this and say, that makes sense, this doesn't make sense.
Right.
Right.
I'd like to speak specifically to that question, since we're on that question, and then I think, but I may be oversimplifying, I think there's like three basic alternatives here. Lots of sub-alternatives, lots of details to be worked out for either one of these three paths, but I'm seeing three distinct possibilities. If it's acceptable to the group, I'd like to make a quick comment about what we just talked about. I'd like to frame these three things, and then I think it'd be helpful for us to hear from the public, so that maybe there's more than these three things. Maybe these three things are kind of the universe of where we're working with, but we could hear some input about what's more desirable to the folks that are here with us or online about one or two of these three. So I think moving into that phase of this discussion would be helpful. But on the very specific question of would there need to be the same threshold, I don't think so. I think actually, just from a philosophical systemic perspective, if there's going to be a threshold that will determine whether or not there's a townwide vote, then that threshold needs to be higher than the final vote. But the final vote is 50% plus one, right? Because the whole issue that we're wrestling with here is about like the necessity versus the occasional appropriateness of a vote, a ballot vote, because maybe in many circumstances the decision at town meeting is going to be overwhelmingly yes, and there's this would be a lot of time and money and effort spent to put it out to a paper vote that might not be as necessary in a year like that as in a year when there's more division around the budget. If that's where we land, then it would seem to me that triggering threshold, it's appropriate for the triggering threshold to be higher, and then when it goes to the paper ballot, like usually is true of a paper ballot, 50% plus one prevails.
My question was more just like a philosophical one of why should your vote count less at open town meeting? Like why like, why should it be easier to pass the budget on an Australian ballot than at open town meeting?
That gets into some things I do want to talk about when we get wrestling with these different
That gets
alternatives
into
around the
participation.
calibration of what happens at the open town meeting versus what would happen in the ballot, and what we've already been discussing about, like what even causes one to make the other happen. But is it okay with us, for us as a group, if I frame what I think look like to me the three alternative paths so that we can hear from the public about those and whatever other thoughts they brought to us
Yes.
tonight? Is that okay as the next step?
Yeah.
I personally was seeing two, and I've heard a third that I think is worthy of us considering further, because it sounds like it might address the efficiency concern, the logistical concern, and still more fully integrate these two systems. So what I see is pretty clear is we have our town meeting day vote, first Tuesday in March, followed by an open town meeting, then followed automatically, if we create a system that says so, by a ballot on the questions that were addressed, the financial questions that were addressed at the open town meeting. Or, as we've been talking about tonight, maybe that's not automatic. Maybe there's good reasons why it's a ballot on first Tuesday in March, followed by an open town meeting, and then only under certain circumstances, those circumstances to be determined, but only under certain circumstances is there then following ballot. But there's the third that would not require ballot, meeting, ballot, but could be just meeting and ballot if we are able to. And I think, I don't know as I sit here, I know from my prior experience with town government the ways in which some of this would be challenging, and those challenges might be able to be met just fine. So I think we need to explore it. But the idea of having a I'll call it mid-January open town meeting followed by a first Tuesday in March ballot feels to me like an alternative that would satisfy the concerns that we have around ballot, meeting, ballot, but would require that some things happen differently in terms of preparation of town budget and the way in which the process gets rolling in December rather than in late January, February. So I'm seeing those three as distinct from one another and worthy of us hearing from the public about and wrestling with, and maybe there's a fourth or a fifth or a sixth out there as well.
Can I just, because I've never heard anyone suggest this January and then March option. So are you suggesting that there would be a vote in January and then a second vote in March?
What I'm suggesting is, just as we have a calendar now that leads to a two-part meeting where there's a ballot first Tuesday in March followed by a meeting, right? I don't know why there couldn't be, if we thought it was a better system, the same sort of two-part system where the meeting comes first. The ballot still occurs on the same day, but instead of the meeting coming after, the meeting would come, and it would need to be mid-January-ish so that there's the proper, sufficient time to do the warning at the end of January, beginning of February for that March election.
So you're saying things that get voted on in January will get voted on again in March?
Yes, some of them probably with or without triggers. Those are all the things we need to explore more fully. I'm saying that before we get into resolving the details, there's fundamentally three different paths to travel that I see, and I think there might be more.
But I think it's really important for us to know what those paths mean before we consider them. I know you're saying let's not get into details, but logistically, how does that work?
Totally, that's what I'm saying too.
Right.
So I'm sorry.
No.
What I'm saying is, let's name alternatives. I've named three. Let's name a fourth and a fifth and a sixth if they're out there, and then we need to explore details of each one.
I don't know what that alternative means, Peter.
I don't know either until we start exploring it.
To me, the January alternative, which Randy brought up and Peter's saying, is the people that are gonna go crazy over it is the select board and town staff, because it means the budget has to be done in December.
Right.
to me, that's like the big, oh my God, they're gonna freak out. But I think we have to put everything on the list. It means having our town meeting in mid-January, our in-person
Yes.
town meeting in January. And then if we do an Australian ballot vote, that can, on the budget, that could happen March 3rd. That's what,
Right.
in general. Again, that's gonna freak everybody who works for town government out, and I don't want them freaking out right yet, because we don't know. But that's what that, and I'm assuming that's what Randy was saying, because it sounds
It's
exactly.
just an efficiency
Yeah,
thing, and it seems
yeah.
like it would save tens of thousands
Right,
of dollars.
right.
Right.
And that's all we're saying right now.
Possible.
And that's all we're saying right now, Hannah, is let's see in our minds, what are the possibilities? And then we'll know, oh my God, that's just like never gonna work.
Right, then we
You know?
can start
Right,
digging
but
into pros and
knowing whether or
cons
not
of
you're
the
voting on
possibilities.
things twice makes a big difference from my perspective, because that there's a lot more issues in my mind with that approach than saying, oh, let's just have the meeting first and
Yes.
keep it divided as it is now. That's a very different conversation. And so I think that like I just brainstorming hypotheticals without knowing what that actually looks like, it seems like just a not a very productive
Well,
use of time.
We got Bob wants to weigh in on something.
If the only thing I want to raise, and you can talk about the policies, but talking about a January early meeting would need the legislature to change its law on when annual town meeting can take place. Because right now it's the first Tuesday of March, and you're allowed to have the floor meeting the preceding 3 days, so Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. So I would urge the commission to look at what you think are the ramifications at the legislature level in changing that, because for better or for worse, the whole state system has had first Tuesday in March as open town meeting day.
Now, Bob,
And-
is that any different though than us setting our open town meeting date and our representative town meeting date for the second Saturday in March?
Right.
I mean, we're already changing the date.
I understand Hillary's concerns with where the meeting takes place and the school capacity, all of that. But remember, you're going to need the legislature to agree to have Brattleboro as an outlier. Now, it did it before with regard to representative town meeting. Doesn't mean it can't do it again. But the point is that just moving things to January just moves your time frame. You're still having 2 meetings.
No, that's what we
know
know.
that.
We know that.
And-
We totally know that. Oh yeah, sorry. I just want to clarify though, Bob, we have changed, we're not changing the date that people are going to go in on the second Tuesday of March. That's still going to happen. But we've already changed our representative in-person meeting to a date that's not within those 3 days of the first Tuesday in March.
In the
So-
proposal as it stands
In the
already.
proposal, you've got to get that passed by
Right,
the
yes.
legislature. But
Right.
that's
But there's no difference.
Right.
And they already changed it, they allowed us to do it for representative town meeting.
And in our research about the other towns' charters, there's a number of different towns that actually deviate from that 3 days, that have all different kinds of schedules in terms of when they hold their meeting and when they do their balloting.
Yeah.
So,
I totally hear what you're saying, but we're already have deviated. Right,
and the
correct?
legislature already has approved it for other towns.
Right? Like, we're just gonna ask them to deviate. If we go through with this, it's just a different deviation.
okay. I'll be quiet.
No, thank you. Thanks for keeping us real. Okay, are we ready to go to the public? All right, but Franz, and if everyone would just, I don't know if you have to go to the mic, but it just.
No,
Okay, but if you want to stand up and say your names, because Jessica is taking the minutes and we need to, she's a saint and we need to make it easy for her.
Hi, I'm Franz Reichsman. I feel a little bit bereft without a microphone to speak into, but I'll go
You
ahead.
can pretend you're
So,
speaking into it.
that's true, I could pretend, you're
You
right.
can go stand there too.
So, pick the animal analogy of your choice, but I think there's a real risk of putting the cart before the horse or letting the tail wag the dog here. And what I'm getting at is that the issue here is the structure of our democracy. It's not the budget, it's not the schedule of the town staff. I think that the consideration of these questions must reflect the desires, the expressed wishes of the people of the town, which has happened very clearly already. Now, I was in favor of all things of representative town meeting, and but nonetheless, I heard very cogent arguments, both for open town meeting, which we got, and also for Australian ballot, that there were reasons that people brought these things forward. It wasn't some kind of spectator sport. It was because people want the ability to participate. And open town meeting, yes, we did have about 3 times the number of people show up as for representative town meeting, but it still amounted to only about 3% of the eligible voters. How about the other 97%? And on March 3rd, people spoke very clearly and said they wanted the opportunity to have an Australian ballot where they didn't have to take up a whole day to go to town meeting, where a much larger number of people would participate in having their say on the town budget in particular, but potentially other matters as well. I don't think you can responsibly ignore that and say, oh, we decided last August that, we were going to do it this way. And I don't believe, now I didn't go to all your meetings by any means, but I don't believe you considered the hybrid position seriously at all back then. I know I wrote something in favor of that, didn't get a response, and you were doing your work in the way you saw fit. But I don't think you can just say, oh, we have already talked about all this stuff, and we're going to therefore ignore the expressed wishes of the voters. They said, we want open town meeting, we want an Australian ballot, and there is no reason that they can't have both. Yes, it'll cost a little bit more money. Yes, the schedule will have to be worked out. But I think to walk away from that is quite frankly irresponsible. So I'm hoping that you will seriously consider all the ramifications of that and take enough time to really hear from the people of the town, because they said what they want. So please listen.
Thanks, Franz. Tom, did you want to go next?
I would love to. Thank you very much. I don't have enough copies for everybody in the room. I ran up a schedule. It's making it hard for you, sorry. I'll hold still in a moment. I'll give 4 more to,
we can pass them down.
we can pass them down.
Yeah.
Basically, at a bottom line, let me stop talking and get where this fellow can catch me. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Franz, by the way. Nice to hear from you. Right before the election, I presented, or had published a description of how a hybrid town meeting would work. It varied a little bit from a description that David Gardenstein had, in that we were not agreeing on what the town meeting would do in terms of budget, whether we amend or recommend. But the schedule, I'll pass these. I'll keep one so I don't get confused. Would you pass a few back? This schedule that I just handed you has an Australian ballot vote on town meeting day in March 3rd or March 7th in 2028. And it has effectively an annual meeting in 2028 would be roughly January 11th. And at this annual meeting, the voters of the town would be able to make a recommendation to the select board for changes to the budget they presented, or make it binding. I don't know enough to know which is best. I think, David thought binding. David said it should be a binding. I thought it should be a recommendation, but he's been right a lot. The rest of the schedule has, all meetings are done by March 7th in 2028. And the primary, the petition we presented said Australian ballot. Personally, from what I heard afterwards, what I heard at the polls, what I've heard since, the key issue is the budget. And in retrospect, there's some issues that town meeting votes on that I do not believe should be Australian ballot. For example, the special assessment districts. That's too complex to explain, you know, I trust our voters, but it's quite a bit of a lift to say, we're voting yes on this, even though it has no impact on our tax dollars, and we have to do it because of statute. That's kind of a silly thing. So I think town meeting can have a whole list and take care of most of what town meeting is currently doing, as long as my bottom line, and not that that matters to anybody, but from what I've heard of a lot of people, and you can do some research, is let the people have a chance to vote on their budget. That's the one that affects everybody the most. So I've given you a schedule, and to Mr. Fisher's arguments, I'm glad you pointed out that there are town meetings all over the calendar. And we have to go to the legislature for approval, no matter what. And if we are united, and we put our charter, you put a charter to the vote that has something like this schedule and Australian ballot, and you'll be doing more research, I hope, for the budget, maybe other things. I think that'll be an easy lift for the legislature. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Tom.
So I have a question.
For me?
Thomas, is January 11th, 2028, is that a Saturday or a Sunday?
It's actually, I think I forget what day it is, but it's not a weekend.
It's a Tuesday.
It was a date that was in the time frame.
Where would you propose that we hold it on a weekday during the school year?
I think we can find a place. Since we know we had 400, at most 400 people.
Well, we don't know that there'll be 400. There might be 800 next year.
I'm sorry, let me say that you can create as many structural objections to any policy you want, but if you're trying to meet the needs and the voters' expressed wishes, I think most things can be surmounted in this community. Let's assume we know that our town meeting is on a certain date. Does anyone here offhand know the seating capacity of the latches?
The latches, my understanding, it's been considered, and logistically it doesn't work.
Well, there are lots of problems we can create.
Right.
Why don't we try and solve problems instead of create them?
Right.
And see if that works. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Brandy?
David,
Do you want to fight? Whoever wants to go first can go first.
No one wants to follow me for some reason.
He wins on beauty.
Well, just age. David Gardenstein. I want to start by saying I don't want to repeat what I've heard said before. I think that Franz very articulately set out what is my position as well. I think that the voters spoke pretty convincingly this past March and said that we want both town meeting and Australian ballot. And I'd like, as this discussion moves on, if we could be moving away from the phrase open town meeting, because open town meeting helps us to contrast from representative town meeting, but really what we're talking about is just regular old town meeting, right? So I agree with Franz that having a town meeting followed by review of the budget at Australian ballot is an appropriate hybrid form of town government, and that's what the voters in Brattleboro spoke in favor of. More people voted for town meeting than Australian ballot, but very sizable numbers voted for both. I have a number of subsidiary issues that I just want to list out, because I went through an inventory, the things that I think the board needs to consider, that I just wanted to list out. And I don't have particularly solid answers on any of them. But setting the meeting date obviously was a consideration. And I like the idea, potentially, of having the town meeting in January so that the budget vote can be consolidated with the March voting and thereby save money. I also came up with this idea of maybe not needing to have in-person voting, but really just having by mail and going to town clerk's office Hillary indicated that might not save a lot of money, but I think that bears some exploration. I do think you need to consider when is the moderator being elected. Because if your meeting is in January, then your moderator was elected the March before. And that may be acceptable, but you at least need to consider that issue. I think you also are gonna need to consider whether the full budget is the only thing that's being put to the voters, or whether the subsidiary articles that feed into the budget also need to go to Australian ballot, if Australian ballot is being considered and is being put into the charter. For example, I agreed with Franz that or maybe it was with Tom, that the special assessment districts, those articles with Tom, that the special assessment districts don't necessarily need to be voted, but if the human services funding remains a separate article, that clearly needs to feed some way into the budget article that's being presented to the voters. So I think you need to consider those as well. I'm also gonna say, because I don't wanna rise again later on and have to speak to it, I do think you should consider some sort of quorum for town meeting. 75 or 100 voters, as one of the only people who stayed and had to stay from before the meeting started until significantly after it ended. There came a point during other business where the meeting couldn't really be considered, the town meeting couldn't be considered representative because we were down to 40 or 50 voters. And I would think that 75 or 100 people being in attendance would be a requirement to conduct some amount of business there. So, thanks for hearing from me.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, I just want to offer a clarification. I don't want to comment or debate any of that. It's helpful, and the other comments have been helpful too, and we'll get into wrestling with these options. On the very specific point of nomenclature about OTM versus town meeting, I think there's a reason for us to keep saying OTM, and it's not related to the reason back several months ago about comparing RTM and OTM, but rather because the Australian ballot component of this, assuming that we do end up with an integrated system of these two different types of town meeting, they'll both be parts of town meeting, right? There'll be a town meeting that we hold, part of which is in person and part of which is by Australian ballot. And so the in-person piece, I don't think we can just call it town meeting. I think we should continue to call it open town meeting. I think it helps with the understanding of the two separate pieces.
Very minor point of information or order. The town charter actually refers to it as general town meeting.
Right.
Does not use the phrase open town meeting.
And we went through that at the end with our charter to make it clear what is open town meeting and what, because it was confusing. So hopefully we fix that. Randy?
Randy Blodgett, West Brattleboro. First of all, thank you. I get this has been a long road. I'm sorry that a group of us felt we had to derail that last year, but we just felt we were not being heard. Voters agreed with us. I know it's frustrating. Thank you, Peter, for hearing me. Thank you for hearing us that are here tonight. We can do better. We can do this more efficiently. We can save money. We can make it better Brattleboro. That's all we've all ever wanted. I thank David. I thank Franz. I thank Tom. I think it's this people coming together, and it's not just what my opinion is. When I ran for select board and I talked to almost every business in town and hundreds of people, no one has the same opinion, but where can you compromise? Where can you come together? That's why we supported the hybrid last year. And when we weren't heard, that's where we put our petition, because we wanted to make sure at least we were heard. And I'm a little frightened that the way this meeting's gone, that we still haven't been heard. I feel a little better after the audience has spoken, but please hear us. We want to support this charter. We want to get to a place where we compromise and we have both. We want a hybrid. Some of the minutia that we talked about with a quorum at town meeting, great, but we don't want an open town meeting where somebody there has to decide whether we have an Australian ballot vote. There needs to be an Australian ballot vote. So let us know what you need from us. I'm happy to meet. I'm happy to bring other people, but let's please figure this out so we can support it and move ahead to get this thing passed in a way that everybody's happy.
Thanks, Randy. I just want to say, I don't want to get in debate over it, but we spent 3 years listening. We put our work on hold to hear what people had to say in March. I know what I heard, and I think I said it really clearly just now, that I hear people want Australian ballot. I think I said that really clearly. I don't even consider it hybrid, because to me, hybrid is kind of a loosey-goosey thing. I see it as two equally important things. I mean, that's the way I see it. And maybe other people see hybrid as being too important. I don't want to call it hybrid because to me, it's two separate important things. How we end up, we're going to find out. where we're going to find out. But I think we did put a lot of work into what we did, and we all, whether you didn't feel listened or not, I know we all had our reasoning to come where we came, and then March came, and now we're back. So I think for us right now, unless there's anybody else, we need to decide, we've heard different opinions of where people think Australian ballot fits in amongst ourselves, and I think the question is everyone willing to, whether it's a couple of us, come back and answer some of these questions at the March, going way back, the next meeting, come back with a look at these, because I think Peter's got I see that he's got the three things, which is it's straight to Australian ballot, it goes to Australian ballot with some kind of threshold, or there's a flip to the system. Would everybody be okay if at the next at the next May meeting, since it seems to be like the two of us are more into figuring this out, no slam on anybody else, but you know what I mean, we're like, would you be willing, Neil, would you folks, we'll have Neil, and I just want to finish my thought, then we'll get the answer after we hear from Neil. Would you folks be okay if Peter and I worked for the next, is it 2 weeks or whatever, to come back and answer a lot of these questions? And then we have another discussion and decide at the next May meeting, if we want to move forward with in some form with Australian ballot. And I'm not saying it's a given right now, because I know there's mixed feelings, but would you be willing to allow us to come back in the May meeting working on some of this stuff? And I'm just volunteering Peter, I don't know if he's even wants to. But why don't we have Neil talk, and then we'll decide if that's how we can move forward.
Thank you. First of all, Kate, I want to thank you for thinking about the state level and us choosing rather than them choosing. I don't think a lot of people thought about that, and I think that's really critical, that this is our charter, not their charter. So thank you for that one. The other one that I would like to talk about in a minute is that I think you can ignore basically the cost of balloting or any of that stuff. If we take, for example, the fact that we're going to spend, probably $30,000 putting in curbing around Green Street, and we're going to spend a huge amount of money on Guilford Street and the old bridge, and then we'd look at the motel program and how much this 20 new motel rooms is liable to cost us. Don't worry about the cost. Worry about the process. We've got the money, and we can put up the money to do that with. And then finally, the other one was that if you have a town meeting where you then from that town meeting choose to run a petition to question the voting, the problem is that the town meeting only represents the 300 or 400 people who are there. Anybody else does not have access other than perhaps retroactively from a video or some such matter. So I would encourage you to do what you have been looking at, and that is two separate but very integrated processes. One is the town meeting and the other one is the ballot. So thank you for all the work you've done. And I really do appreciate it and know that this is a tough decision. Thanks.
Thanks, Leo. All right, so,
Is Gary still around?
no, I think Gary might have had something for Hillary, but she had left the building. Oh, there he is.
Actually, you're right. I did have something for Hillary. It always comes with a price tag, anything we do, but that's neither here nor there. We're big spenders in Brattleboro, as you probably know. I think anything we do, we should always put a price tag to see how to go forward. And you are right about what you're saying. You kick it up to Montpelier, they got other things going on. They're going to tell you, figure it out. I got that gut feeling. They're going to say, you guys, you can do this on your own, figure out the direction to go. As the gentleman said, this is ours. This is something that we're going to cherish for years to come and for the next generation. But I think a cost analysis to see what it looks like. And if the budget is turned down, which it had been before, and you had to come back again, how much is that going to cost you for another meeting for that? Factor in a lot of things, think all the ifs, the whats, or whatever, because, that final determination. As far as space, it was a great turnout, even for me being an RTM member, Gary Stroud from District 8. And how many voters do we have in this town? Anybody know?
9,000.
Out of that 9,000, how many showed up?
3 something.
Okay, so that being said, I don't think space is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about your staffing, your time management, and all the other things. So I think a cost analysis along with that, you can sit down. I think you'll come to a good conclusion on how to factor it. Because if you're going to be doing Zoom for people who can't make it, that's going to be an extra cost. I just don't see that. And who's going to be able to monitor all those people on a Zoom? And how much can Zoom, the platform, cover? That only worked during the COVID when we had that with RTM because it was a small amount. Now imagine a huge amount. That's another factor to think about. So having that being said, I'm sure you make the right choices and the right decisions. You'll use the right wisdom to figure it out. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Timothy Belknap, downtown resident and voter and taxpayer. I just want to say that I understand this is super frustrating. You guys worked, 3+ years or whatever on this. You came to a certain point, and then these 2 petitions upset the apple cart. I do have to say, on March 3rd, the people have spoken, right? And I just want to echo what Franz has said, that, yeah, they've spoken in favor of OTM, and they've spoken in favor of Australian ballot. And I thank you ahead of time for figuring it out. Thanks.
All right, so does anyone, would you folks be okay if Peter and I took charge of this and came back with every which way scenario of everything, with these 3 things that we've just outlined, come back with the pros and cons of each, and then we can have a discussion in May?
I'm sorry to be the stick in the mud, but I really don't think we've established what those 3 things are. What does it mean to have the vote twice? Does it mean the first one's advisory? Does it mean this?
That's what I think what we would like to do, if you would allow us to, is come back to the next meeting with the difference, with framing it, with the scenarios, and say, oh no, we think this is the advisory vote, or this isn't the advisory. If you would let us flesh all these 3 out and come back with 3 different scenarios. Maybe it's 6 scenarios, because maybe there's 2 different scenarios under each thing. But let us actually really think it through and say, here's some avenues for this. I mean, we could sit here and do it now. I know Maya wants to go be home by now. but I think if you would allow us the opportunity, I don't know.
So I'm up for it. Thanks for volunteering me in. And the point is to be able to have a more structured conversation about it. When we're throwing the ideas out of our head, it's harder to have the structured conversation. If we bring something forward that frames like it could look like this or it could look like this, then there's something that either people are going to agree with or people are going to disagree with, or people are going to ask good questions about, well, that sounds good, but how, it seems like this other aspect of it might not work or whatever. But I haven't heard a 4th or a 5th or a 6th. I've heard good input around basically the overall process and these 3 separate ways of doing it. And so if we were to bring something back that frames the conversation about each of those 3 separate paths, then as a group, hopefully we could, start to focus in on which path is preferred and what the holes in are that need to be plugged before we can, finalize it as a recommendation.
I just feel like we're treating it as a foregone conclusion that we're gonna do both, and
No, but I think.
like you're saying, we'll come back with these three, and I did not read that vote as people want both.
Understood, and
Right, okay, well,
Okay.
I'm saying we may look at these three and we may all conclude none of this is gonna work. You don't know what's gonna work and doesn't gonna work until we do all the work behind it.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it. And we all may disagree even after we get all this, and you may still feel like, no, we need to keep open town meeting. And who knows, I may go like, yeah, you're right, Australian ballot's impossible. Like right now, I don't think it's impossible.
Right.
But again, we don't know enough about these three things to know whether this stuff, like I'm looking at it, my first reaction, as you all knew, was, oh my God, flipping it, that's gonna make everybody on town staff go nuts. But we haven't asked them. So maybe they'll go like, God, that would be actually a relief to get the budget done in December. I don't know. But until we put it all on paper, I don't think we're gonna know whether we like something or not. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, until you eat the beans, you don't know whether you like them. You know what I mean? You could say you don't like something, but we don't know yet. I don't know. Maybe I'm just oversimplifying that.
Well, I guess I want to say it a little bit different way. I think all of that's true. And Hannah, what I'd ask for you to accept, even if it's frustrating, is that some of us, among the six of us, feel like it's important to take a deeper dive into these possibilities. Where we're going to end up, we don't know yet. It may be that we end up with something where either unanimously or less than unanimously, we actually recommend something that is different from what's in our existing draft. It may be that we fully explore all this stuff and hear some more from the public around it and disappoint some of the people who've really vehemently proposed that what we recommended before is insufficient, right? I don't know where we're gonna land, but what I know is we don't know enough to make that decision right now, because we haven't fully enough explored what a more robust Australian ballot portion of an integrated system would look like. And so that's what, if the commission does agree, Kate and I could prepare something. I don't know exactly what it would look like. I'd like to think of it more in terms of framing than in proposing anything. That we kind of, take what we've heard, take what we've thought about, take what we know from other places, and frame some deeper consideration of these options for how to bring in a more robust Australian ballot component.
Right.
And I hear loud and clear that if you were doing this yourself, you think that time and energy is not necessary. But as the six of us, I think it's important that we create room for it.
I'm not saying it's not necessary. I'm saying we spent 3 years and people have been advocating for this hybrid since before that vote, and we did consider it, and we didn't take it any further. And I just think that we are doing ourselves a disservice by tinkering with this more when what we came up with was really good. And it's clear I'm going to be outvoted, so I'm not going to waste anyone's time talking about it anymore. So,
but I also think the reality is there was a vote in March, and there are two petitions for charter changes that are sitting up in the legislature. One is for Australian ballot and one is for open town meeting. They're not going to be, there's no time to talk about them this year, but they can be reintroduced next year. So for us, I think, to pretend that doesn't exist and just put a charter in that's going to be added to this, I think that does a disservice to the voters, and I think it does a disservice to the legislature. You know what I mean? I think we can't ignore what happened in March. I mean, we may end up, after we do this little thing, and at the next meeting we all go, we're just gonna, we may end up with sending up what we got. But I don't think we can ignore what a lot of people in our town wanted. And the reality is the legislature has two things up there that aren't gonna go away. That's to me, like, even if we don't, and maybe after all of this, you know, say a hypothetical, we decide after having a conversation about all these three things, that we decide, no, we're gonna send this up, you know, then we can say to the legislature when they get our thing, well, we tried all this different scenarios, this is what we recommended, and this is what we sent to the town, and the town voted on it. I just feel like to take a meeting, to take the time to do something that a whole bunch of people told us in March they wanted, and that is sitting up in Montpelier right now, is not doing our job in a way. I just sort of feel like we're not doing our job.
I just don't think we can interpret that vote as people want both. People want either, people want something, but there's nothing in there saying they wanted both of these things together.
I think you're wrong.
Yeah,
You're wrong. You are absolutely wrong.
And I can tell you how I voted, and it was for one and not the other.
I can tell you how I voted. I can tell you how probably the other 13,550 people that didn't go to open town meetings
You need to
would vote.
identify yourself, sir.
I'm Lee Leibowitz from Chestnut Street.
Thank you.
Thank
for the
you.
minutes.
And it's just, you know, I think, you know, Peter and
Kate
understand what the whole town is trying to tell them. And if you don't, I'm really sorry for you. But you understand it, and that's good, and I support it. I support what you're saying and that you're considering it, and hopefully it'll pass. I think if the question had been properly written and not in a manner to discredit the democratic process, it would have been, do you want Australian ballot? Yes or no? The way it was written, someone explained it to me that it was like a double negative. It was confusing, and I bet the number of people that would have voted for Australian ballot would have been way higher. But people that wanted it voted the wrong way on the questionnaire, just because it wasn't worded clearly. You know, it was like whoever did it's really smart if they wanted for it to not pass, because that's what happened. Or it didn't pass overwhelmingly above the open town meeting. The open town meeting, you know, it used to be RTM with 150 people representing the town. And then this time there was like 350 people. But there's another 13,000, 650 people that aren't being heard. It's just like that meeting. I went to that meeting up there. It's like, you know, they used to say you can't fight City Hall. One person can't go in and fight City Hall. It would be like maybe 10 or 20 people or 30 people couldn't overwhelm that crowd. It was just everybody wanted the same thing. And all this stuff with giving the money away and tax relief for things that really don't deserve it in my mind, I would have voted no. It would have been $0, no, period. And I think that most of the people in this town would have voted that way. And especially the way the budget's going now, I think they absolutely would vote that way, but they gotta have a chance. And if you don't have Australian town ballot where everybody can vote and have a say, you got nothing. You know, if it went your way or whatever way you wanted, and I lost, I'd say, okay, everybody had their say, that's the way it is, and live with it. But when no one's being heard, except for 350 people that had this just about all the same mindset, it's not democracy by any means, period. And I'm sorry that you can't understand that, but that's it.
What I hear you saying is that you would prefer Australian ballot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the open town meeting's good. You get a lot of discussion, a lot of information. And I think that should be out there through the newspaper, whether you guys or the select board or the town clerk or everybody puts out a brief, a paragraph a week or something that goes out on the internet or to the newspaper or something, so people could be kept up, read up on what's going on in town, what's going on, what's happening, and what the alternatives are. But without a vote that everybody gets to have a say in, no, I don't think anybody's going to be happy, and I don't think that what was voted on up there at open town meeting would have stood in an Australian ballot. So what does that tell you? That I think more people would have voted a lot of that stuff down.
My only point is that it doesn't sound like you want both. You want Australian
I
ballot.
want both, because it gives everybody a chance. I do want both. You know, it's, more information is better, right? Knowledge is power.
We'll
So
go.
I'm all for both. I agree with
Before you go to
Franz.
Spoon, may I respond to Anna's question? I can tell you with complete certainty that between 377 and 512 people voted yes on both issues. Now, I doubted my math this morning and didn't have a chance to check it, so it might be more. But of the people who voted, at least 312 voted yes on both, and possibly more than 577 voted yes on both. It depends how you capture how you allocate the did not vote, and I didn't allocate those at all.
And it's also hard to know people's motivation, how they voted, because it was a really confusing thing.
There's that.
I'm looking at it as each one got more yeses than nos.
That's correct.
You know, that's how I'm approaching it, because you can't,
Yeah.
we can debate this till the cows come home, like who voted how and why, but
We could check all the ballots and see how they voted, but that would be
we take too
a
long.
nightmare for the clerk.
So, yeah. Let's go to Spoon.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. What I'm picking up is, and this has probably been ongoing for as long as the commission has been meeting, is that there hasn't been decided a criteria to which a decision is made. It seems like the commission is constantly torn between trying to do something democratic and trying to please the public. I don't think democracy is defined as a majority vote. Otherwise, we'd still have slavery in the South, and you could go on forever and ever about what any community or state or country just about. Or if you decided that everything should be decided by all the people, then we don't even really need a town meeting for most things. I think the town manager could put out a list every week on the internet or however you decided of all the decisions that needed to be made, and everybody in town could just vote electronically. That would give everybody in town a chance to vote on everything. Would that satisfy democracy? Would that be a good way to go about life? So all I'm asking is, and saying, is that it would be easier to make decisions if you were weighing it or measuring it up against something. Is this decision strengthening democracy in Brattleboro? And explain why you think it is. Thank you.
Thanks, Boone. Okay, so would everybody be okay? My final thing is, if Peter and I were to come back on May 28th with, as Peter's saying it, a framing of what these three things could look like dealing with Australian ballot. And then we can.
I so move.
Was expecting a vote, okay?
Well, shouldn't we have a motion? If you don't want to have a motion,
No, we can, I mean, if.
I take it back.
No, we can, I just didn't know if there was, like, I know, Hannah, would you be really, like, do you want us to vote on this, Hannah, or to be on the record?
It doesn't matter, I'm gonna
Okay.
get outvoted,
Okay.
so.
Okay, so it's okay with everybody if we put an agenda item on the May 28th meeting where we take these three things and frame them, and then we can decide what we're doing
Yeah.
with Australian ballot on May 28th, or decide
Or
if we.
beyond, start
Yes.
to
No, we can
start to
start
move towards a
talking
decision,
about it.
and we get there when we get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Not to make a decision
No,
on May
but
28th.
it'll give us a starting place on things that we probably will think about at 2 in the morning, of things that we haven't thought about right now. Okay, so we'll come back on May 28th with that. Okay. Does anyone have any other final thoughts on that, or can we move on to the next agenda item? The next agenda item is our work priorities going forward.
I think we should deal with this big issue first,
Yeah, I just want
before we move on to.
Oh.
No, I mean, on the agenda for next time.
Yes, oh yeah, we'll put this and then we'll go to, I just want to make sure that there are a couple things that I just want to make sure we're identifying, because we did do a lot of work on the charter, it's in really good shape. But because RTM went away, which we had anticipated in our charter, I just want to make sure I flag that we just want to make sure we're okay with what we do with the Finance Committee. The Human Services Committee, we've received an email from David Minor, the chair of the Human Services Committee, asking that instead of 11 members, we can go to 9 members. And I think based on, I want to flag that based on what we decide to do, there may be, if we go with an Australian ballot component, there may be changes to human services funding, but I don't know. So I wanted to flag that as something. As David Gardenstein mentioned, open town meeting quorum may be an issue we want to talk about. I just wanted to flag right now, the commission meeting coming up is, the next one is May 28th. Then we have 2 scheduled for June 4th and June 18th, and I just want to make sure those are still okay with people, and if they're not, let me know.
Yeah.
And then what we can do, yes?
It's not up on the town's website, the June 4th one.
Oh.
I was gonna ask you when that, I knew there was 4 meetings
Yeah.
and there's only 3 on the calendar.
June 4th and June
Thank you.
18th. And thanks, Randy. And then we can discuss it maybe on the end of May 28th, where we are, what we think.
Yeah.
And then we're eventually gonna, this is just on my list of keeping, when we're gonna seek the charter vote. Original plan last year was November. We do have an election in November this year. We have an election in August this year. So I'm just keeping that on. So if we think of anything else that needs to come up along the way, I'm just flagging this list so that we don't lose sight, so that we can hopefully, I would love it personally if we can get our work done, if possible, May and June, and have a vote in November.
Yeah.
They'd have to warn it, we'd have to go to the select board, they'd have to warn it in.
They have to have a hearing.
Yeah, and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I know there's the election in August, but that's, I think, pushing it for us, because we also want to do public education. And if we're still meeting in May and June, I don't know how we get on the August ballot, but that's just me.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Does anyone else have anything?
Couple other things. I just want to note that particularly in the finances section, where we lay out a schedule of by a certain date, some things have to happen, and by another date, other things have to happen. Depending on where we land with this town meeting conversation, it's very likely that there's going to need to be some tweaking of that as well, just to have those sequencing, have the sequencing line up right once we've made other decisions, if we do change what we're recommending for town meetings. So I wanted to flag that, and similar to that, there may be other implications to other sections. The piece that I know it's really clear is, if we change the timing of when certain budget decisions are going to happen in terms of when the voters have their say, then it's going to impact the finances dates. But there's maybe other aspects of the work that we already did that might need to be tweaked depending on where we land about town meeting. And then in preparing for tonight and going back and just rereading, like, where were we? There were a couple of things I'd like to bring up at some appropriate time when we're getting the finishing touches on this that are just tweaks. For instance, there's some language about lapsed appropriations that uses what I think is archaic language, and we didn't catch it the first time through, and it would be very easy to change a word and have it just be clearer to the public what it means. So there's a few spots like that I'd like to just call out at the appropriate time.
I've had a question as to why we eliminated a preamble.
I've had that too.
And I'm actually somebody is gonna give me some language
I think
that I will bring to consider.
All right. The thing is, I think we want to look back and remember why we did when we have that discussion.
We voted on that already, and I
Yeah.
really don't want to rehash that.
Well, if it's been raised by somebody, this is not a final draft. And I understand it's work, so if we were to put something in. But I think we should, if somebody in the public brings it up, I think we should consider
We can
it.
consider it, and then we can remember then why we took it out when we see a new one. We can harken back to
Yeah,
why we voted the way we did.
well, I think we didn't
I
like
guess
it.
if that's gonna be considered, I would hope that the person who brings it up would also go back
Yeah.
and watch the motion and watch the discussion
Right.
as well to make sure that they also meet a certain criteria to
Right.
lift it back up. Not to say, but just because
We did
if
discuss
we
it.
are gonna be asking ourselves the question, I would appreciate it if they would also
Yeah.
consider the question too.
Yeah.
Why we said no, like why they would say yes. And not just because like, oh, you deleted it, here's an option.
Yeah.
So,
Gary,
I guess the only final Jeopardy answer to this would be is definitely have another informational meeting for those who didn't. Each district had their own informational meeting for those who would show up. As you can see, the gentleman in the audience did not, understand, and apparently everyone's having their own interpretation of what it meant. And I think this is the final end game to what you're doing. And I think a very huge, important pros and cons informational meeting so people understand. Because once this gets sent up, all bets are off. This is it. They determine up there in Montpelier what comes next. So I think you really need to have a meeting to people really understand this because they're all busy focusing on gas prices, taxes, and everything else. This right here is going to make a final determination in many ways of what the town's direction is going to go. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
thanks, Gary. We did have 42 meetings so to date on the charter, and we will do, as our plan was last year, was to do a public information campaign on what the charter changes mean to the town.
I think he talked about two different things there. He talked about caucuses like it was part of the open town meeting or RTM. And I don't know if he was specifically addressing your campaign to inform people of what your changes are. So I'm confused after that as well. I think what he was trying to say is this gentleman wasn't aware that there was any of that going on when he referenced newspapers and some other things, but I'm not sure.
Right. Oh, Gary, do you want to clarify, Gary?
Being interrogated, Randy.
Go for it.
What I was trying to say, basically, like, a lot of people, some people show up for some of the informational meetings that each district held. Like your district, you held what was going on with, going forward with the charter, with the votes meant. Having that being said, did you reach everyone in the district? Did they clearly understand? Did they walk away with clarity? So I think this is the final, repertoire of what's going to be said and how this is going to go forward. When people get a better understanding of what this entails with this chart. And that way they can walk away and say, I made the right choice. Not just the charter revision, but also when the people come to vote, I made the right decision. Informational meetings are basically what they are, information, but you cannot determine what that person's, how their votes are going to be.
Yeah, I know we're trying to make our way to the door, but I want to be clear that there hasn't been any public information process around the broader set of charter change recommendations. That got put on hold, and we had a very robust community conversation around the form of town meeting. We've had a vote. We've talked about it a lot tonight. We're headed in a direction of, either creating a more complex system or not. We'll get there. all about the town meeting piece of this, but there are a bunch of other things that we think will be good for the town in terms of mainly streamlining, mainly taking aspects of the old charter and making things simpler or clearer. And we haven't brought any of that out, to anybody other than those of you who've been coming and participating. Thank you in the process along the way. So that process, we need some space for that as we go forward from these next few meetings of ours before the voters will vote on it. And that's where there'll be, I think, a really fascinating new conversation to have around the broader systems of our town government and not just the town meeting piece.
Okay, is there anything else that anyone wants to talk about? Or are we ready to adjourn? Anyone want to make a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Joy is making a motion to adjourn. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thanks, everybody, for coming. We'll see you at our next meeting.